I welcome you all to today's class. This is the second class in our series, and today we are going to be looking at understanding Cinema 4D interface and Workspace. So when you open Cinema 4D for the first time, there's a tendency for you to get scared and say, wow, there are so many icons around, there are so many menu options, what do all of this do? Well, there's nothing to be worried about. And in my honest opinion, I've used a number of 3D software, and I can say Cinema 4D has one of the best interface. It's also one of the most interesting software because you can achieve a lot with just little. Okay, so where do we start from? This is Cinema 4D, of course. Let's start from the upper part of Cinema 4D's interface. Up here, you can see something called Untitled. This is your file name, and it is where the names that you have given each file will be stored. So this is called Untitled because we are yet to give it a title. And the cool thing about Cinema 4D is that you can actually create multiple files and switch between them while working. Now let's save this file and try creating multiple new files. You can create new files in Cinema 4D by clicking on this plus button by the side of the file name. You can switch between your files and also give them your desired names. I think this is a really interesting way to work. However, I would advise that you do not have too many tabs open and you don't have too many complex effects in different tabs so that Cinema 4D does not start to lag. So as much as possible, you want to keep things simple when necessary. Also, all of these here, these are your file names. That's the first thing you have up here. Now to the far end right here, you have your different types of interface, or should I call it interface menu, where you can select the type of interface you want. So this is the standard interface for Cinema 4D. If you want to model, you can click on model and you can see it adjusts the interface to fit modeling more. If you want to sculpt, you can see these are your sculpting tools here. If you are working on UV edit, this is your UV island here. You want to paint, you can see your painting tools here. So it depends on what exactly you want to work on. And you know, the good thing now is that you can customize your own interface, and you can also load an interface. So I can create an interface, for instance, and send it to all of you so that you can load it. All right, so let's get back to the standard interface. Good. So I was saying this is the file name. This is your interface menu. Next thing we have under here is what we call your main menu, and your basic menu system, anyone, but let's just call it main menu. So this is almost what you have with most software. You have your file menu where you can create a new project. You have your open project. Maybe you are working and you want to open a project, so you come to file, open project. You have merge project, you have to refer to saved projects, close projects, close all projects, save projects. All of these are things you are probably used to. Now, what I would just like to speak about very quickly among the file menu is save incremental. This is a good way of working, especially when you're working with some complex project. What save incremental does is that it allows you to save what you are working on and then save another version of it. Now, the purpose of save incremental is that if you eventually start working with just one file, maybe you spend hours working on a simulation, it's looking good, finally looking good, and then suddenly your system crashes. The file gets corrupt. You try to retrieve it, but you can't. Then you start to cry and say, oh, why? But if you save your file incrementally, so let's give this a name. Let me call this save project as Okay, let me call it as class 2, save. Now if I come to file, save incremental, class 3. If I come to file, save incremental, class 4. But let's see something now. Open project. You see that class 2, class 3, and class 4 are saved. So I can always go back to class 2. This is also useful when you want to carry out a crazy experiment and you just know that Cinema 4D might crash. So you just quickly go and save incremental. That's how I work. And that's why if I show you my file now, you see that for one particular project, I can have, depending on the complexity of the project, I could have, even depending on how long I work on the project, I could have about 50 incremental saves. So I just like to save, and it's also good when you want to show your workflow to say, okay, I started like this, I went to this process. Save incremental helps you to work on that. And then lastly, save incremental works well when you are modeling something. So you know, sometimes you want to have the base model, like the model when you have not added too much details to it. So by saving incremental, you can keep the model at its basic phase, so that in case maybe the client makes some changes, or maybe you yourself want to do some adjustments, you can always go back to that initial file. You can always go backwards, because there is a limit to which you can press Ctrl+Z. There is a limit to which you can undo for any software. You understand? Especially when once you close the software, all the undo you can do automatically disappears. It only works differently, I think, for ZBrush, because ZBrush, you know, if you have used ZBrush, you know, you can actually always move backwards with by clicking some buttons. All right, so you have edit. Like I said, the basic things you see in other software, you can undo, you can redo, and you can do all of that. Yes, you know, but let me we will eventually touch many of these guys here, but I think these, for what we are trying to learn, for getting the interface, these are not the priority. Let me take you through what I'll call, or what is called, the command palette. And underneath your main menu, you can see all those guys you have here. Then you can also see these guys here. These guys are called your command palette. Now, your command palette are basically the most common functions that you have in Cinema 4D. The thing about Cinema 4D, first of all, is that you can actually address a command in different ways. So when I say a command, I mean if a particular function you want to do. So, okay, let me use the example of undo. So I move this back here and I want to undo. So you can actually use an icon. This is the icon for undo up here. Or you can simply press Ctrl+Z. Or you can come to edit and press undo. So what I'm just trying to tell you, that commands in Cinema 4D can be accessed in different ways, just like most software. What you see here now, what you see at these sites, these icons you see are, so Cinema 4D put them there for you so that you can easily access the most used commands or most used functions. So you don't have to be going to the menu system every time to get a command. Now, having said that, let's talk a little bit about these icons. A good way of learning Cinema 4D is by taking your mouse and hovering over a command. So once you take your mouse on top of a command, or let's say on top of an icon now, Cinema 4D labels that command, telling you what it does. So in case you ever get lost trying to wonder what most of the icons in Cinema 4D do, or you are trying to remember, just take your mouse on top of the icon and Cinema 4D would show you its name. So what does this icon do? Simply take your mouse on top. What does this do? Cube, add cube object. What does this do? Add text spline. What does this do? Polygon, use polygon mode, and it tells you what the tool does. So this is a very good way to to actually learn what some of these tools do. So yes, let's go ahead. I said I want to take you through some of the most basic things you are going to need in Cinema 4D, and I'm going to be starting from this set of command palettes. I'm going to bring in an object. How do you bring in an object in Cinema 4D? Of course, there are different ways, but let's say you want to bring in a primitive object, a simple object like a cube. You can see you have this icon here, cube. If I press it, you can see a cube comes in here. Now, one thing you should also note about Cinema 4D is that whenever you see an icon with this tiny triangle at the bottom right, it means that that particular icon is pregnant with some tools. So to activate those tools or to bring out that option, you simply click on that tiny triangle you can see at the far end here, and then you can see we have some other shapes. If you come and click on this particular icon, you can see that tiny triangle. So if I click on it, it means we have some other selection options. So basically, you want to bring in a simple shape in Cinema 4D, you can just come to this particular guy here and you see your cubes here. Remember I said that your main menu contains most of the things you are going to be doing in Cinema 4D. So you can come to create, see primitives here, you see mesh, and all everything you have seen in this place here, you can also see it here. So let's bring in a cube from this place. Now we have a cube. Now very quickly, whenever you bring in an object into the viewport, so what you have, this center screen you have here is called your viewport, your 3D viewport, and that is where you view everything we are going to be working on. Whenever you bring in an object, you will see that the name of the object appears on the side of your screen. This is referred to as your object manager. Okay, so we have brought in a shape. I'm trying to explain the interface of Cinema 4D to you with very simple commands. So this is the shape we have brought in. Now let's bring in another shape. So I click here, I bring sphere, and let's say I move the sphere. Now a common mistake or an issue a lot of people have, or a lot of students have when they are starting out with Cinema 4D, is that when they want to bring out maybe something else, like they want to bring out the other tools that are under an icon, they don't click at the bottom here, and also they just click it and expect it to come out. So when you click on it, you hold it, you click and hold till the other tools come out. So you click on the tiny triangle and you hold till the other tools come out. So let me delete this cube, and let's bring in another tool, or another shape rather. This is cylinder. So we have 3 shapes here. So we are still talking about Cinema 4D's interface, and I explained to you that these things that you see here, they are called your command palette. But I want to also explain the interface with a basic assignment, which is, bringing in some shapes and selecting and moving the shapes. So let's look at the tools here. The first tool you have here is your selection tool, and this is a very important tool. It's a tool you use in any software, any editing software, because you have to select what you're working on. So you come and click here. Now if I don't click on my selection tool, let me click on this particular tool, and I'm trying to select, you can see that I'm not selecting. Instead, another thing is happening. And this was one of the issues I had when I started learning Cinema 4D, because I'll be trying to select, and why is this guy not selecting? So you have to be on your selection tool before you can select an object. Now you're either on your selection tool or any of your gizmo tool. I call this the gizmo tool. That is your move tool, your rotate tool, and your scale tool. So if I'm on my move tool, you can say I can select an object. Okay. So I'm going to get back to that. The reason why all of this we're not selecting now is because I was not on the right thing to select. So whenever you want to select a simple model, you have to see that you are on model mode. But don't worry about this. I'm going to explain this when I get to this place here. But basically, I'm saying that you have to make sure that you are selecting either your selection tool or any of these 3 tools before you can select an object in your scene. If you select something else and you are trying to select an object, it's not going to work. So you have your selection tool, and when you see your selection tool, you see that your selection tool is pregnant with some other tools. So because you can see that small triangle here, so I'm going to click on this, and under it you can see I have my brush selection tool, I have my rectangle selection, I have my lasso selection, I have my polygon selection. If you are used to other 3D software, Adobe, any of Adobe software, you see that that's how Adobe has some sort of this some tools that look alike like this too. But let's start with the brush selection tool. Your brush selection tool, which of course is the most used tool, allows you to select, like it's like using a brush to select. So you can draw over these guys and you are selecting everything together. So I draw this, I draw. So any object your mouse over on top, it's going to be selected. Now that I've selected these two, of course I can move them. So your brush selection tool is your default selection tool. Before, in other older versions of Cinema 4D, it was called live selection tool. So it allows you to select multiple objects by just hovering on top of those objects. Now, under your brush selection tool, you have your rectangle selection, which of course allows you to select in a rectangle form. So if I left click and drag, I can select this. I want to select these two guys. I can select this. You use this a lot, especially when you are modeling. So you can select this. The shortcut for it is 0. That's for your rectangle selection tool. You have your lasso selection tool, which allows you to, if you are used to Photoshop, you know about this lasso tool. So you just sort of draw. It gives you this flexibility to draw, over what you want to select. Let's try. Yep. Then you have your polygon selection tool. So this is also another tool that is in Photoshop. Well, let me not use Photoshop very much because some of you might not have experience with Photoshop. But basically, when you say your polygon tool, it allows you to draw polygon shapes and then to select anything that is within that polygon shape. Okay. So you can see we have to select. Now we have many more selection tools, but most of them are useful when you are actually modeling and you want to select the components of your models, which includes your point, your edge, and your polygon or face. As we get into the modeling class, we are going to talk about this more. Also, once you click on your selection tool, make sure that you have your model mode selected. So these are the different modes when working with Cinema 4D. When we get to our modeling class, I will explain what these things mean. So those are the two things you need to take note of when selecting. Number one, make sure your selection tool is activated. Number two, make sure you are in the right selection mode. Now, you have your move tool here, which allows you to move objects around in your 3D space. So you can see you want to move. This is like your basic move tool in other 3D software. You want to move. We are going to talk more about the move tool, but at least for the basic moving function, this is it here. So of course you can move in your y-axis upwards. These arrows allow you to move in whatever direction you want to move. We have the green arrow, which is the y-axis, and that's for moving upwards and downwards. You have the red arrow, and which is for moving right, left, horizontally, and you have the Z arrow, you can see, which is for moving backwards. That's for depth. You can always look at what you are doing with this space. You see these buttons here. It allows you to know whether you are at the dimension you are, if you are actually in the right dimension. So you can see, as I even move my object, as I move my camera around, rather, you can see it. This is moving with it. So this can always let you know whether you are in the right trajectory. Okay. So you have your rotate tool. You can rotate an object. You have your scale, which allows you to scale an object. You can scale towards the y-axis by selecting this tiny yellow button. Of course, I'll still talk more about these little details here, but the direction something is facing would let you know where that gizmo or movement function, movement, rotate, or scale function will be carried out in. Now, another thing you can that would help you in locating where icons are is your commander, and that is this first tool here. See this thing here, this button that looks like a search button, and in fact it does what the icon portrays. It allows you to search for commands. So once you press this guy like this, let's say I forget where the move icon is, so I can just type move inside. I can come and select move, so it brings out everything that does with move here. So this, I want to move a model, so I click on move, I press enter, and you can see the move tool is selected. So I can now come and click on this model. Let's say I want to rotate the model, but I don't remember where my rotate option is, so I can search on the command and press rotate model. Let's click on this and press enter. So this is a very good way. You use your commander like when you start working on complex thing, and you don't want to be going to the to your menu options every time to start going under things to say, okay, I'm looking for this. Sometimes when you just want to go straight to the point, you just come to your commander, or better still, you just press Shift C. So Shift C brings out your commander, and your commander allows you to search for any command, any function that you want to perform in Cinema 4D. Let me quickly take you through the asset browser.
So your asset browser provides you with various assets such as 3D models, materials, textures, presets, and scenes. You can easily and quickly import these assets into your scene.
It's like your CG Trader or your TurboSquid or your Free 3D. These are websites that you get 3D objects from that I'm talking about. So it's like where you can easily access models, materials, and many things in Cinema 4D. Let's go to models, for instance. You can see we have models. Under models, you have so much options. Under your model options, you can see that you have a lot of things here. You have appliances, beds, bedroom. These are simply models that you can import, and this allows you to work quickly. So let's look at food, and you can see you have different food options. So let's bring in orange, for instance. How to be connected to the internet before you can use this option. This works with the internet, so you're actually downloading from Cinema 4D Assets Library. So by the time you look at this, you can see you have an orange in your scene already. This might not look high-res, and that's because most of the time your display or your viewport doesn't give you the high resolution of your model, because if it does, it might start lagging. So this is an orange now. Let's say you want to bring in, let's delete this orange. Let's say you want to bring in, let's go to somewhere else. Let's look at, okay, humans, 3D people. It seems that is going to be boring. Let's look at vehicles. You want to bring in a quick vehicle into Cinema 4D. So this vehicle is even rigged. It's rigged in case you want to animate it. So this is a very quick way. We are going to have a class that is dedicated to how you can bring in 3D objects, but I don't think you should be fascinated about using assets for now. Based on our syllabus and based on our earlier discussion, I already discussed with you that I want you guys to master the art of modeling. So there is a tendency for you to just want to come to your asset browser. In fact, I was reluctant to show you the asset browser because that might discourage you from learning how to model. But for a start, it's always good for you to be able to understand how to create your own 3D object from scratch. You don't have to go in that line. Like I said in our first class, sometimes you can consult a 3D modeler. You can actually speak to a 3D modeler to do your modeling for you, but it's also good where you know how to do this stuff yourself. So this is your asset browser. You can probably just try to check around it and see some of the things you can do with your asset browser. All right, let's move around. We have looked at some of the tools here. Let's look at a few tools in this place too. Like I said, I'm moving based on what I think is going to be very important. So let me quickly explain what these guys do. So initially I was mentioning to you that I was having difficulty selecting because I was not in the model mode. All of these are different modes that your objects can be in. So your objects can either be in point mode. When your object is in point mode, you can see that you can select the vertex. But now, the vertex are not going to select because there is still something you need to do. So in Cinema 4D, before you can model, before you can edit the parts of a model, you need to move it from primitive to being a polygonal object, or you move it from being a parametric object to being a polygonal object. So by doing that, if I want to edit this object, and maybe I want to model on this object, I can't select the point until I come here. See this particular tool. This particular tool is very important. The shortcut is C, make editable. You have to make an object editable before you can work on it. So until I come here and click on this make editable, that's when I'm going to now start being able to model this object. So now I can come to my points mode. I can move this guy about. Let's say I'm trying to model something with this guy. So we are still going to talk about all of this in our in our modeling class, but for a start, where you might want to actually do some experiments with some of this object. But if you have not made your object editable, you are not going to be able to access the points, the edges, or the faces. So always make editable. There's still much you can do when your object, of course, is at its default stage. You can probably select, let's select this object again. There is much you can do. You can adjust the size, different angles. You can add some fillets. Maybe you want to make it curvy and all of that. We'll talk about that later, but there's much you can do. But by the time you want to start dissecting the object, you want to start doing some internal edits, you just have to make it editable first. So yeah, that's what these modes are for. Once you have made the editable and you want to select a particular thing, so you have your point, you have your edges. Once you want to select your edges, and once you want to select your faces. So you have your texture mode. We don't have a texture here that allows you to work with textures. You have your enable snap, all of that. You don't need most of that for now. These are still some modeling options. Okay, let me take you through a few of these too. Yes. So here you have your viewport solo. Your viewport solo, what it simply does is that whatever object is selected is going to become solo. It's going to be the only thing showing in the viewport. So if I select this guy now and come and click on viewport solo, you can see it's only what is selected that is going to be showing. Viewport solo hierarchy. This is when you are working with hierarchy, which I'm still going to get to later on. So yes, these are some of the basic things you need. Here you have your render options, your render view. We don't have a light. Let's bring in a light. If we had a simple light, for instance, like create light, let's bring in this physical sky, for instance. Okay. So when I click on my render view, you can see it renders everything. It puts on the shadow and it puts all of those other things there. So you have your render to picture viewer. All these things are still for rendering too. And then here you have your material options. You see all these materials are appearing here because of that that car we brought. Once you click on this here, let's say you want to add an object, you can of course come and select whatever object you create and just whatever texture or material you create and just drag and drop in your object here. So how do you create a new material? You simply click on this. Okay, so if you want to close your material tab, this is where you of course edit your material colors and all of that. But let's say you want to close your material tab, you can just click on it again, then it closes. So for this place too, you don't need to worry much about many of these things. I'm still going to go over most of these things again. I'm just giving you a very quick overview. So when this place what you have here is also what you have in this crate. Most of the things you see here, generator, deformer, field and all of that, lights and all of that. Maybe you want to bring in light, you can see you can always come to create here. You can also just simply come and find it here.
Let's take a deeper look into Cinema 4D's interface. I'll start by giving a more detailed explanation into Cinema 4D gizmo tools.
So you have your move tool, which you use to move objects up, down, and you can see the direction that your gizmo tool is facing will tell you the direction that you are going to be moving in. So up. And one thing you should note about your gizmo tool is that they are always set in the positive direction. So remember the graph you did in secondary school, and then plus up, minus will be down, and for the z-axis, plus is this direction, minus is here. So this gives you an idea that of that.
Notice that whenever you select an arrow in your gizmo tool, it turns white. This is to show that that particular direction has been highlighted.
Up, down. Now for movement again, this is called your attribute manager. So I can click on this cylinder, for instance, and you see these are your attribute manager. What it does is that it gives you further details of your shape of whatever is selected. You can edit the object properties like the radius, how wide do you want it to be, the height. I believe this is something we are going to touch when we get into modeling too, because this is sort of parametric modeling in a way. So you can edit, very simple edit. You can add a fillet, you can add a cap. You see I made this guy, the edge softer. I can make it. These are very basic commands. But regarding the movement, I'm trying to speak about the movement tool now. You can click on this thing called coordinate, and when you press coordinate, you see the transform options of that particular tool. We are dealing with position now, with movement. So if I take this up, so like I said, the x-axis means you are moving horizontally. So why? Sometimes you want to work with precision. Sometimes you get a project and they will tell you that, okay, this guy is like 20 centimeters from the floor. So you have to come to your y-axis and press 200, and you can see it goes up. So this just allows you to work with precision, and I think that's something you will do subsequently. So yes, you see that in your move tool, you also have this particular blue. I'm not talking about the lines now, I'm talking about these tiny arrows here. You see you have the red one and you have the green one. Now when you select this particular blue, you see that it selects both the green and the red. So what this does is that it combines both the horizontal and vertical movement. So when I select this, I can move this in that two direction. There is no depth being applied to this now, because I'm just moving in the y and the x-axis. It's the same thing with these guys here. If I come here now and select these guys, it's not going up, because only the z and the x-axis is activated. So this is one quick way to move. Sometimes maybe you want to move but you don't want to move backwards, so you can just click on this, and this will give you more control over your movement. You can also notice in the transform options that it is just the x and y values that are being affected. So this is just more details into your how you can work with your move tool. Let's look at the rotate tool. Now let me say this very quickly. When you are working with these three tools here, the best thing to do is to get your hand familiar with the shortcut, because you don't want to be going every time coming to click here, coming to click here, coming to click here. I will admit that because I use a number of 3D software, that sometimes I still do that, and because of I come from a Maya background, I've used Maya for a really long time, and recently I'm delving into Unreal Engine too. So my hands are used to Maya's shortcut. But if you are going to be dwelling in Cinema 4D, and that's one thing I'm trying to get used to, you have to get used to these guys. To move is E, the shortcut to move is E. To rotate is R, and T is to scale. So E, R, T. So instead of coming here, if you have to come here every time, and if you have to imagine you are doing a project now and you have to come here like 100 times because you want to move, by the time you come here, you have already spent a considerable time in your work just moving like this. So get used to the shortcut. E to move, R to rotate. Now let's look at the rotate tool. The rotate tool works in a quite similar way with the move gizmo tool. So by the time I hover this particular red rotation symbol now, or this circular symbol, you can see it gets highlighted. The best way to approach your rotation is just to look at the direction that a cycle is facing and then just rotate in that direction. Now very quickly, the thing with rotation in Cinema 4D is that it doesn't use the X, Y and Z. You can see that position uses X, Y, Z, scale uses X, Y, Z, but see this R stands for rotation. So you see here you have your HPB. Now what this HPB means, H stands for heading, P stands for pitch, and B stands for banking. Of course, you can change this in this place here to XYZ if you like. This is what Cinema 4D works with, and these are just basically aeronautic terms that they use to explain the rotation of a plane. So let's look at the scale. Now you notice that you have the same gizmo tool, and you have the green arrow facing the upward direction, the red facing the horizontal direction, and the blue which is facing backwards. Now this is the same thing you have with your move tool. And of course, if you want to scale uniformly, you can left click and drag as far as your scale tool is activated. So this is how you scale something up uniformly. Now you might want to scale only on the y-axis. Then you can see I'm scaling, but everything is still scaling uniformly, and that's because this shape is primitive. So when you are working with a primitive shape, you cannot use this your gizmo tool to scale it ununiformly, to scale uniformly. But one way you can go about that is by, you see these tiny yellow icons here, you can use it to actually scale it downwards. That's one fast way you can actually scale in a non-uniform way. So let's bring this guy up, and then let's. Now I want you to notice something interesting. You notice that if I move this guy, right, I want you to look at the coordinates now. If I move this guy, this cube, you can see it moves in the coordinates option, right? If I rotate it, it moves, it's rotating, it shows in the coordinate option that I'm rotating it. But if I scale it, it doesn't show. Let me go back here. It doesn't show that I'm scaling it. That is because what is happening right now is that the size is increasing. Now you have this is called your coordinates tab. You have something called your coordinates manager, which you can click on in this place. Once I activate it, your coordinates manager contains size. That is where you see the size option. So when I move it this way, you see that this is where it gets reflected in. You can see. At the same time, when I want to scale, I can actually come here and just do it in this place. So scale and size are two different things, but at this point, they are not things you should be concerned about. In fact, you might not be concerned about it for a long time, because most of the time, especially as beginners, you might just want to do a small scale option, and you can always come to this place and scale what you want to scale very simply without worrying about that. So yes, that is more details, more insight into our gizmo tools. For some of the interface options I did not talk about, let me quickly do a run through them, and then I believe we will be able to call this class a wrap. So yeah, this option you have here, this set of tools you have in this place, these tools are called your create palette or object palette, because you get to select different types of objects. You can bring in text. Maybe you want to write a text, for instance. There's the text tool. And see, if I click on this guy here and I come to object and I write fly, press enter, the word transforms to fly. So you can easily write with this. Okay, so you have many options here, but as we go deeper, as we delve deeper into Cinema 4D, we are still going to be looking at some of these things. But see, when I wanted to create a camera, it was still from this same place I came to bring a camera. if you want to bring in lights, or okay, this sky for instance, different sky, floor and all of that, you still come into this place. You want to bring in your lights, you come here, you see your different light options. So this is a very quick way to access different objects in Cinema 4D. Let me delete this and click on O to frame this guy. By this side here, you have what you call, I've already mentioned this in our last class, that this is called your material manager, and it is used for managing materials, for bringing in new materials. And when you click on it, you have the option of your materials. I said this place is called your object manager because you get to see all the objects you bring in your scene here. This is called your attributes manager because once you click on any object, it could be it a shape, be it a material, you get to see the properties of what you click on in this place, and you're also able to edit it. So at the bottom here, you have your playback controls and some other options. These keys you see here, you can call them your playback or your animation controls. This is not an animation class, of course, but we are going to get to a class where you get to learn how to animate. But if I click on this object, for instance, and I do a little bit of animation on it, I'm sure based on your experience in other 3D software, you understand what I'm speaking about. Now if I want to play the animation, so that's why I said that's your playback options. You can move to a previous frame, you can move to the next frame, you can move one frame forward and all of that. You can move to the go to the end. And like I told you in our last class, when working with Cinema 4D, a good way to know what a particular tool does is by actually moving your mouse or your cursor on top of that tool, and it shows you what it does. So go to next key, play forward, go to previous frame and all of that. So these are your playback and your animation. You have your animation options. You have your your record active objects. When you want to start an animation, you click on this. When you want to do automatic keying, you click on this. So your playback, your animation controls, your keyframe, at least these are some of them. Of course, these are not everything. These are some of them. I brought this up already, and I already did mention that this is your coordinates manager. So you have your timeline here. Right, this is your timeline. Of course, you can move your keys on your timeline. You have your frame range, which you use to determine how much of your frame you want to be shown in your timeline. And also, you can edit it. You can input, if you don't want to do it manually, you can input a particular frame in this place, and that would be the end, and this would be the beginning. So you see 0 to 81. So I think these are the basic things you need to know for now. These are the basic things in your interface you need to know about. Like I was saying, Cinema 4D, from my experience with other 3D software, Cinema 4D has one of the, in fact, from the all arguments that I get to see online, Cinema 4D seems to be the one that people support to have the easiest interface. And I know that might not look like that immediately you open the software, but from my experience, especially with Maya, I think Cinema 4D offers an easy interface, because by looking at this, like there are not too much icons flying up and down. You can easily access things in Cinema 4D. This is your create panel. This is where you select your modes to work with. This is your command palettes. These are your file or your menu systems. These are the interface you get to choose to work with. I'm going to call it a wrap. I think I've been able to give you deeper insights into Cinema 4D interface.